Natasha Jen. Born in Taiwan, Natasha Jen is an award-winning designer, educator, and a partner at Pentagram, one of the world's most renowned independent design studios. Jen moved to New York to pursue graphic design, studying at the School of Visual Arts under esteemed professors like Paula Scher. She began her career interning at Pentagram, where in 2012 she was named one of the studio's youngest partners. Throughout her career, she has collaborated with major clients such as Google, Pfizer, Waze, and many more, leading design teams on projects that seamlessly blend creativity with strategic vision. A standout project in her career was the redesign of Reddit's visual identity, where she and her team skillfully navigated user reactions to create a fresh, impactful direction for the platform. She views her role not as a traditional creative director, but as someone who fosters collaboration and nurtures creative growth within her team. This is Two Stocks with Natasha Jen. First of all, I want to say it's a pleasure and honor to have you here at Two Stocks. Welcome.
Thank you, Sajad. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I wanted to start by asking you about your introduction to graphic design and to the world of design itself. What was the reason that you chose this path for yourself?
I was introduced to graphic design when I was in my undergrad school, the School of Visual Arts. So I applied for the fine arts department, and that's what I studied in the first year. But during that first year, I learned that there's this other department called graphic design. And before that, I really had no idea about what graphic design is. And I was really good. I did really well in my photography class. And my professor in a photography class suggested that I look into graphic design, because I couldn't pursue photography because at that time, there wasn't so much digital photography, which is all like still analog photography. So the film itself was really expensive. So she said that, yeah, how about you look into your graphic design? I did. And I enrolled into the department without actually knowing what it was. But I started I remember the first class was a class run by our department chair, Richard Wild, at that time. And that class was called Visual Literacy. Okay. And that was really about how you actually develop the ability to read visual. Yeah. And
Interesting.
I just fell in love with that class. And then, in the same week, I had my first typography class. Again, no idea about not even like the word typography, right? What I actually meant. And my professor, Sarah Giovannitti, she was our, instructor at that time. So she prepared a list of typefaces. Okay, very few typefaces. I remember there was, Times New Roman, there was Garamond, there was Caslon, Franklin Gothic, Futura, Helvetica. Uh, I think, yeah, maybe that's it, right? And she kind of explained the characteristics of each typeface, and I just fell in love with that. There's something that felt so engineering like, but it also felt very artful too. So I just fell in love with graphic design immediately, upon the first week of the course.
Yeah, the beauty of it is like it's a bridge between art and like engineering,
Yes.
the actual market out there. It's not something that only happens in art galleries, it's in real life. So for me, that was actually the point that made it really interesting as well. For those of our audience who doesn't know, you are a partner at Pentagram, but correct me if I'm right, but you did your internship at Pentagram as well, right? When you were a
Yes,
student.
I did. Yes,
So
I
I
did.
wanted to know what was it like to go from a student to this giant design firm, and what was the main thing you learned as an intern in Pentagram?
Well, Pentagram was very much respected by all students, and being in New York City, we all knew where Pentagram was. Okay. And the office happened to be very close to my school. So when I first heard that Paula's team was looking for interns, I just applied right away. And that application was basically okay, I'll tell you the story. So we had our professor Karen Goldberg at that time, and in the class, Karen said to us that Paula's team was looking for interns, and she also gave us a phone number. Okay, there wasn't emails or social media, right? So I wrote down that number, and after the class, I went downstairs to a payphone. I didn't have cell phone at that time. Very few like students use cell phone at that time, right? So I went down to a payphone on the street and I just called Pentagram
That's
right away.
legendary.
Right away, okay. Um, and the senior designer who was looking at intern's portfolio was Tina, okay, Tina Chang. So she was in the meeting. She couldn't pick up my call. And I left a message to the front desk. I said that I'm calling about the internship. And they said that, well, why don't you try to call her an hour later? Okay. And I was looking at my watch. I was like, okay, I'm literally going to call her in an hour sharp. Right. And that's what I did. So I managed to schedule an interview with her, and I brought my portfolio. And at that time, again, our portfolio was all printed materials. Yeah, everything was printed, was mounted, okay, and we put them in a black case, sort of like a suitcase. So I went in, I showed her my work, and I got an internship. So, that felt really, really great, because again, that told me two things. The first thing is that, okay, I'm going to learn from this job. But the second thing was that my work was probably good enough. Yeah, to get this internship. Okay. So that I think that was really important because that gave me a little bit more confidence about what I was doing. And I think that having that, you know, confirmation very early on just kind of became this very positive force throughout my school years. Because once you know that you're actually good enough, right? You never know how good you are, right? Because you can't know, right? But if there's somebody else who actually who's a professional who looked at your work and confirmed that your work is good enough, that gave you confidence, and that confidence would just propel you to do better work. And that's what happened to me, right, throughout my school years. Okay. And before interning at Pentagram, I interned at a small design studio called Eric Baker Design. And again, interning, for Eric at that time was also a very big confirmation about that I actually wasn't bad. Because as a young person who's just, new to all of this, right? You never know how good you are. So it was, through these confirmations, I started to set basically higher standard and higher expectations for myself. Yeah. So I think that was really a kind of, pivotal, right? It was very important, pivotal
Yeah.
kind of moment.
That
Yeah.
confirmation is something, a boost that is always needed to take the
Exactly.
next
It
steps
helped
because
you.
the
Yeah.
first days are stressful.
Yeah.
And also, you've experienced as an intermediate design for a junior graphic designer, and step by step, you moved up the ladder to become uh, a partner at Pentagram, for example. Uh, what would you say are the main factors that a designer or an employee who is starting to join these design firms need to take into consideration to make this transition to going up this ladder smoother or maybe faster? Is there, would you say, a secret recipe? Is it just gaining more experience, the portfolio? Is there anything else, would you say, that helps this transition go faster or smoother?
Good question. Well, portfolio, your work definitely matters, right? And you kind of need to know, where in terms of the quality of your work, you kind of need to know where you are along a spectrum. And
Yeah.
and like I said, I got the encouragement very early on, so I knew that my work was probably in the sort of, in a sort of upper level, right? I knew that, and of course through my classes, looking at other students' work. So I kind of knew that. But again, it did not mean that I was really good at everything, right? And again, learning is lifelong. Okay. So the work really, really matters. But there was something about, I think, about me that you can say that it's a kind of soft skill, okay, that I just intuitively had, was that I was very curious, and I think I'm still, I'm still really curious. I had a lot of curiosities pretty much about everything. And that everything could be like, oh, what was the work that was done before me on the server, for example? Yeah. Okay. You join a new studio. There's always a lot of work, right? Like right now, okay, the work is all on the internet, right? But I was really curious about the presentations done. Like, how do they do presentations, for example? And I will literally go through all the projects folder by folder on my own, okay? Because I wanted to know, right? But then that curiosity then extended into that I wanted to actually do everything, meaning I wanted to actually manage the studio. Yeah, I want to make sure that our files are properly backed up. That was the time when we were still backing up projects on CDs, meaning that you had to look at, the folders, you had to burn CDs, right? I was like looking at, oh, do we have enough paper in the printer? Do we have enough this? And I just started doing that, okay, just because I was this was at base design. I was, at one point I was the only designer in the studio. Base was very, very small at that time. And because I was able to, not that nobody told me to, but I was able to do a lot of things, right? Yeah. And I didn't ask for permission, right? I just did them. Okay. Um, I got promoted. F- Basically, my salary and my title changed in a year from junior designer to a senior designer after a year. Okay. And again, I think that, that happened for a couple reasons. One, of course, was that I had this sort of intuition in me that, and curiosity and desire that I wanted to do as much as I could, right? Okay. Uh, but also I was in a very small environment. Yeah. Meaning that there were only a couple of designers at that time, so that my efforts were seen by my bosses at that time, right? Right now, it's very hard to actually, be seen in a large,
Yes.
right, in a
Yes.
large machine, right? And you have to kind of really figure out how you can actually, show in a kind of very elegant way. How can you actually show the work that you did? So I think that I was lucky in that I was in a small environment. So that kind of way of working just kind of stayed with me. For example, I was managing all the projects that I was doing, and that went on continuously even after I left base design. Okay, I joined 2 by 4, for example, right? And we didn't have, this role called project manager on every project. There, project managers were kind of very scarce kind of role that you would only have them, and they were typically freelancers for like very, very big clients, that are on some sort of really fast timeline. But otherwise, the designers, the senior designers would manage their own projects. And that's what I did. Okay. That really included just everything, right? Do we have the materials? Who do we email, with every day, right? Talking to clients, right? So I started doing that. So I think that, gaining these soft but very, very essential uh operational skills, I think is really, really important. It's super
Yes,
important. Yeah. But
yes,
now,
that's true.
everything is a lot more professionalized, I think, including project management, for example, now is mostly handled by project managers, right? And that is required in, I would say, 99% of the jobs, right? But I also see that what happens is that as a designer, you never get the chance to actually really figure out all the intricacies in project management, because that is also part of the design,
Yeah, yeah. It's
right? And now,
knowing the project, the client.
exactly, exactly. And now, you know, somebody else, a project manager, is doing it for you, right? And I think that that learning opportunity is being taken away by the how the profession is set up right now. Okay, so I told my team, that they really have to actually get into the project management, okay, side once a project is on track, right? In the early stage of a project, sure, we need project managers to just kind of, get things going, calendar and all that, right? And you also need to learn the clients, who are they, who you should talk to, right? But once, that relationship is established, boom, the total responsibility is on the designers. Then project managers, they just need to be told. They need to be informed. Yeah, but they're not managing it for you. Yeah, that's sort of how I try to run my team.
And also in 2010, if I'm correct, you opened your own design studio for a short amount of time, and there's
Yeah.
a good reason for it.
Mhm.
Is that a move that you suggest to, and to what, in which level you suggest a designer that's seeking that dependency on their own, like opening their own design studio? And what was it like actually?
Yeah, I would say, of course, opening your own studio is the sort of most ideal way to go, right? But it's not the only way to go. But um I think that there are required, knowledge and skill sets to do that before, you just say, hey, I'm going to open it up, a studio. Like at a minimum, and you can be the best designer, right? You know how to design really well. At a minimum, you need to actually be able to manage your own projects. You need to be able to actually create timelines. You need to actually be able to, outline, proposals, for example, right? That itself, as a solo practitioner, that itself can take up a lot of time. Yeah.
True, true.
You have to know how to do invoicing. So you need to actually have these, very basic but critical business operation skills. Yeah. Before you open that. And again, those skills are never ever good enough because you're always learning. Each situation brings new learning and you realize that you're not doing it right, right? And you just keep improving on it. But you need to actually have some very basic knowledge to have the confidence to say, okay, I kind of know how to do this, right? Let me just start out with this and then improve upon it. And I also think that building a network with other studio practitioners, there's at a similar level as you, so that there is a kind of mutual support and learning opportunity is really, really important. Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Mhm.
And also for your own studio, for example, only after 2 years, I think you got a call from Pentagram that they wanted to work with you as a partner. Do you think there was a specific reason, the way the studio worked or your own personal portfolio, that you got that call and you got that offer from them?
I established my studio in 2010, and I was invited by Pentagram's New York partners to present my work to them, to the office in early 2011. Okay. And at the presentation went really well. They all felt that I was, the right candidate, right? Um, but the presentation that I presented was not just only work that I did on my own, because I only had my practice was so new, right? I only had maybe two projects or three, maybe two, yeah, or three projects that were really sort of created and made, on my own by me, right? But before there were all these projects that I did throughout my time at, two different studios. Um, and then, after that presentation, after the invitation came, I still had to go through interviewing different partners, right? So it was an invitation, but it was not fully confirmed, right? And you have to get all partners' confirmation in order to join. So that process took about a year. So the way that I looked at it during that time was that I had two paths in front of me, right? One path is continuing my studio engine works. Yeah. Okay. I had my own office at that time, a small office. I had I think I had three interns working with me. I got computers, I had desks, right? I could continue going that way. Or I would then, diverge and, say if I really got hired by Pentagram as a partner, then I would just sell my computers, sell the desks, and then go into Pentagram, right? Um, and then just let the future kind of play out by itself. So that's sort of that's what I did. Yeah.
Hmm. How did it feel coming back when you got the confirmation for the hiring and joining Pentagram? The same place that you did your internship, the first days, how did it feel? Was it stressful?
Well, of course. I think I think the stress came from a couple of factors. Not only that, oh, I'm going to become a partner at, one of the world's most well-known design firms, right? There was, I think, very little of that. I was very honored, of course, tremendously honored. But the stress actually came from that I wasn't sure that I was able to operate, yeah, in a totally new, obviously much larger and a lot more professional environment, right? So that was a very big change, right? Large, of course, I was joining a group, an office that had, 100 something people, but large in terms of all the possibilities in projects, right? When you're on your own, the size and the newness of your studio, I think kind of dictates the types of projects that will come to you. Yeah. Okay. But when you're part of a much larger and legacy firm, your possibilities open up right away. But you don't necessarily have the prior experience to actually operate them as a partner on your own. You know what I mean? Right. I did big projects at different studios, great, but I wasn't the owner. I wasn't the one totally responsible, right? Holding the client relationship, right? So those situations I think created you know I think a level of anxiety, of course, but I have to say that, this kind of anxiety, and it's not necessarily bad, is I think
Of course, yeah.
it's a very permanent part of this profession. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because right, because you're always encountering situations that you have never dealt with before. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly, that's true. Hey everyone, Sajjad here. First of all, thank you for listening to the podcast. I wanted to quickly let you know about our merch drops. Right now, I'm wearing one of our designs, which I really like, which is about when designers end up doing everything from design to copy to video and even social media. Our merch store is full of cool designs, specially made for graphic designers to wear. So make sure you check out our merch store. Also, our website is up. ToolsStudio.com is live. Our website now has the complete archive of Tools Studio videos, Tools Talks episodes, and exclusive interviews and articles only available on ToolsStudio.com. So make sure you check out our new website. And finally, if you want to support us and you like what we are making and you want to actually help us to be able to create more content like this, you can join Tools Studio on our Patreon account. You can also get discounts on our merch by joining our Patreon account. Now back to the episode. And also, if, for example, someone wants to join your team and they want to get hired by you and join your team as a designer, not as a partner, as a designer who wants to be in your creative team, what are the most important facts that grabs your attention when you're looking at their portfolio?
Mm. So I think that, hiring designers, the decision on hiring designers is actually more multifaceted, meaning that there's definitely the work itself, right? Because the work itself already tells you a lot about the individual. It tells you the level of craft. It tells you the sensibilities. It tells you, um, you know, I think intellect, right? Because you kind of see how a person answered a problem. So the work tells you these things, but then the work itself doesn't necessarily tell you everything, right? And then there are these very other important aspects, such as personality, such as communication skills. Okay. I know that, yeah, it's like, oh, everybody can actually speak, right? But it's about the sophistication in how you communicate and whether you communicate at all, right? Those are the unknown things, okay, that you don't really fully know. I mean, you get a good sense, more or less, during the actual interview. If the work, is interesting and you talk to the person for the first time, you can kind of predict a little bit about how he or she will behave, but never fully, right? So, the decision then becomes you're also taking a calculated risk on someone, right? Knowing what the risks may be, right? You kind of you need to know that, meaning that you know that, oh well, this person has fantastic work, right? But this person is really not the best communicator. Okay. Yeah, for many reasons, a lot of times people come from, other culture, right? Work is great, but they're just not able to articulate. So you kind of know what the risks may be. So you make your calculated risk, yeah, on that. And you will have to then try to actually improve these areas that need improvement just through the day-to-day practice. And that I have to say, that's not the easiest thing.
Yes,
Because
exactly.
right, when you're actually trying to actually do the work, right? And the work itself has all sorts of stress associated with it. It's the quality of work. Are we actually doing the right thing here? There's already a lot of uncertainty in that. And you're also trying to actually, help or trying to actually teach somebody about certain things here. These two things don't always go really, really well. I have to be very honest, here. But you try to do your best, and again, each person's learning trajectory is very different. There are those who
True.
pick up things right away, right? There are those who just don't really show any signs of improvement, right? What do you do with that, right? So it's always a kind of constant rethinking and reevaluation about the individual. Yeah.
On the portfolio itself, would you rather looking at a portfolio that has a very high variety of different works, or something that has a couple of complex projects, but not like, let's say it's not 20 projects in one portfolio, but there are like 4 or 5 complex ones with details?
Yeah, I look for depth
Hmm.
and I look for complexity within each.
Interesting.
Yeah. Depth is really, really important because again, the depth of a project shows the sort of the ability to kind of really, build out something that is perhaps more system based, right? And again, that's a kind of different mind from just doing things that look expressive, right? You need to be expressive, but you need to actually then, become an engineer to kind of engineer the things. So depth is really important. Complexity is really, really important. And also I think craft, creativity, and oftentimes I also look for a level of novelty. That is really important because, you can get a very good portfolio, but this portfolio could have actually come from a lot of different designers, meaning that anybody could have done that, right? But novelty is something that is so individual based that you begin to actually know a little bit more about the artist in front of you. So I look for novelty, but again, complexity, depth as well.
Interesting. And
Yeah.
also managing and leading a team of these exceptional designers that work for you. If someone, let's say, wants to become a team leader, a creative director, art director, what do you think is the main skill that they need to obtain for in that level? Not becoming a designer, but someone who is going to manage other designers.
Well, here's the thing. The best design managers are oftentimes the best designers or vice versa.
Well,
I'm talking
that's
about this when it
music to
gets
my ears. Yeah.
when it gets to the senior level, okay? Meaning that the reason why they're really good at managing it because they know how to do this stuff really, really
Yes.
well. But nobody actually says, "Hey, I like to be a manager."
Yeah.
I don't think in design I don't think in design designers are like set out to become managers. That's not what I was thinking in my mind, right? We ended up in design because we like to design. We're more artistic, right? But we ended up being managers just because we know how to do this stuff so well. And there's nobody who can actually manage them better because nobody knows how to do these things that well.
That's true. I remember the first time that I became like an art director or design lead, I was like, I want to do the design actually. I was doing the briefing and like telling other designers what to do and wanted to, but at the same time, I really wanted to do the design myself. As I just missed that. So I think that's really important in order to like understand what needs to be done in a design project.
Yeah, because you know how to do it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. And also you've worked with some of the biggest companies and brands out there, Google, Reddit, Pfizer, Waze, all of these big corporations and companies, especially on your Reddit project. What's really interesting, I wanted to know from you, is that Reddit has these really dedicated fans and subscribers and users. So when
Hmm.
you're going to rebrand project like that, what are some of the main key elements that you were thinking in advance so there's no backlash at the end, so the outcome is successful and like the whole process goes smoothly from this old brand to the new brand?
Yeah. Well, when it comes to these large digital brands, right? Digital platforms, where usability is a huge consideration, and usability is made up with many different factors, right? So there's that, okay. But I never ever ever think about how the users will react to what we do first. Never. because that already sort of predetermines the outcome, right? Even before you start doing it, right? Because you're like, oh, because this is a segmentation, we have to do it this way. I mean, basically, you're already letting the users or customers to predetermine the outcome. I try to actually bypass that. Yeah. That is not to say being ignorant about the ultimate people who will actually engage, encounter and engage with the work, but that consideration always comes in a little bit kind of in the middle or later, because you have to actually just really open up the possibilities first. You have to interrogate, right? And a lot of times I have to say, people, meaning clients and designers included, people didn't even get the questions right to begin with. We think we know, they think they know, right? But like after you start kind of really looking into it, you realize that we didn't like the questions on the table are not even the right questions to begin with. So you have to actually go back, right, and get the questions right. Right, in order to actually find the right answers, right? That's sort of that's always, my mantra about everything. Not It's not to be ignorant about users, but you can't just start out with that, because that just basic that may not be the right questions to begin with.
Yeah. And you gave many amazing speeches around the world in different topics regarding graphic design, design itself, working with clients, working in different environments. What do you think is the beauty in a designer getting back to its community, like teaching back, giving these speeches? What is the motivation behind? Because I know your schedule must be pretty busy, but you find these times to. You gave us the pleasure to come here and talk with us as well. What do you think is the motivation and the reason behind that?
That's an interesting question. Giving talks is a kind of, in most cases, it's a kind of one way communication, right? We, the speakers, are on the stage, we present, and there may be there's always some questions from the audience. And after you can talk to some of them, but largely it's a kind of one way communication. But teaching, I think, is very different, because teaching, you still have a kind of hierarchical relationship between a professor and a student. Okay, there's that. But teaching is more a kind of dialogue. That is basically, it's a two-way conversation. Okay. And I really, really, really enjoy dialogue about design, about what people are thinking, about what people are doing, because these dialogues oftentimes present themselves as more kind of industry based conditions or problems. You know what I mean? That's manifested, right, within a question that may seem small, that may seem really targeted, that may seem really personal. Yeah. But the fact is that actually reflects a larger industry change or industry condition that we're in. And also that means that there's the condition around design is changing. I really enjoy those conversations. And I think that, we're not having enough of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Mm.
This
Yeah.
uh, also for these days, as graphic design is evolving every day into different branches, different. Is there a specific area, additional skill that you think if a designer knows this as well, they make their work and their career much more like the possibility of becoming successful is much more visible?
Hmm. Well, before, getting into skill sets, I always believe I'm a firm believer in that you first have to actually find what you're good at.
Yes,
And that
that's
is
that's
something that
really true.
nobody can actually dictate, can even just like tell you or to try to actually guide you on that. That is a total personal development. Okay. you need to have that first, because that is the thing that can actually give you confidence. And once you have confidence, you will have probably better curiosity to even though you get deeper into that, and to also branch out into other things, because you're like, well, I'm really good at typography. I can now actually design typefaces pretty well, right? I can do display typefaces. Maybe display typeface is not good enough. I need to be able to do like a full suite typeface, right? That would actually prepare you to do that. I think that is really, really important, and if you feel like you haven't actually found, any of these things that you can actually confidently say that I feel confident, I'm really good at this, I would say try to actually get that down first. Yeah. Okay. But on a very practical level, I think motion, at least I think, 2D motion, I think, has become such an integral part of today's communication. Yeah. Because the media landscape is always is in motion now, right? I think that used to be, before, it was always like a really pretty separate discipline. Yeah, you have to go to like motion studios to do motion, right? A completely different business model, right? But now you see that motion has become this sort of, an offering, also a practice itself in a lot of just, general branding or design studios. I think motion is something on a practical level will be really, really important to have. But again, you have to actually first, really identify what you're really good at.
Do you have an area that is your favorite when you're doing on a, like, let's say if you're doing a typography, a poster design, is there something that when you are working on it, you feel like, ah, it's my favorite thing to do?
Here's the thing. Like I know a couple of things about myself, okay? I know that I am never, like, formally speaking, the best designer. I always knew that, okay? I was always surrounded, when I was a designer, meaning, working in different studios, I was always surrounded by designers who were just a lot better than me. And I would look at their work and be wowed by them. Okay. Right. I know that I was good enough, but I was never the best.
Especially
I,
with
oh,
social media, sorry to cut you, but with social media, sometimes you look at someone else's work and the way they are working, and sometimes your confidence, you're like, oh, this so many
yeah,
things I don't know about, or something like that.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Right. Um, I, I also know that I'm probably not I'm definitely not the best when it comes to the actual typographic design. Okay. I think I'm pretty good with typesetting. But when it comes to like the expressive typography, I lean very heavily on my talented designers around me. Right. I know that. Okay. But what I know that I'm really good at is that I'm really good at critical thinking. I have the ability to compartmentalize things and organize them in a very sort of diagrammatic kind of way very quickly. Okay, so that is basically the way how I think, right? To be able to decipher things very, very quickly. And that again, that doesn't have any shape and form itself, but that actually, I think, in a very big way, like really sort of sets out the path for us to actually to go about projects, right? And again, I never try to like predetermine how designers do things, because the principle here on my team is that every project is an open canvas for the right to again put down their mark, okay, as designers, as artists, as thinkers, all that, right? So Natasha rarely does sketches, okay, yeah, because sketches are already formed, right? I don't do that, but it's a blank canvas, but I always get in at the right time to actually help kind of change or determine the trajectory of the work. Yeah. And I do diagrams a lot. My team knows that. I can draw, but I can diagram very well.
Hmm.
That's what I do. Uh,
Same with me with drawing. I
yeah.
remember I wanted to actually join. Most of my friends in art school, they went to go and start drawing like painting and like really complex paintings. And I did
Really?
one sketch, and I remember our professor was like, "You should learn graphic design." Like,
Yeah, you're
this,
right.
yeah, this looks like a graphic designer. Because
Mm-hmm.
actually I was looking at objects as a designer. I was like a mixture of being creative designer and being lazy. It was just like minimizing the details and making a minimal portrait, where at the end my professor was like, this looks like graphic design. But then again, it's the same thing that you mentioned, knowing where you're good at and putting everything around that area and like making yourself shine where you're good at, instead of being less confident about the areas that you're not good at.
Yeah.
Also, one last question that we always ask our amazing guests is that if you had to choose your top 5 favorite graphic designers, artists, visual artists, anyone that throughout your career you've been most inspired by, who would they be?
Are they limited to graphic
No,
designers?
anyone as a designer, as an artist that inspired you. It can be musicians even.
Can be musicians. Can that be can that be architects?
Anyone. Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, I am I'm a I'm a big admirer of Rem Koolhaas, the architect. For I mean, for I think that it sounds really obvious because he's one of the most, I don't want to say just respected, but he is really known as one of the, you know, uh, genre and, he's a defining architect in so many different ways, in his very unique way. But he always manages to bring a level of criticality and a way of questioning things that we don't see so often, right? And of course, not to mention his influence on architect on the discipline of architecture, urban design, and I think just culture at large. Yeah. And I am deeply inspired by that. Yeah.
What about any graphic designers throughout like old times, new designers, or even design
Um,
movements? Actually, it doesn't
you
need to be
know,
a.
I you know I well I there are a lot of graphic designers work throughout history that I learn from, right? And I look up to. Many are actually from the past and current Pentagram partners, but I really I personally I was, and I think I'm still very drawn to April Greiman's work. Okay. It's just in there's this sort of originality in how she created images. Yeah, these graphical, images. And also there's this sort of inherent just visual exuberance in that. But there's also a level of, profound clarity that comes with that. And that's a kind of very, very unique sort of signature that comes from her, that it's very hard to actually find other similar work out there. And I always admire designers who are able to sort of establish their personal language in the commercial work that they do. Yeah, I think I find that, harder and harder nowadays. And I find that uh less and less common nowadays. Okay. Yeah.
Yes,
There's
it's
a lot of
much
good
more
work.
difficult these days. Yeah.
Is a lot more difficult. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because we all have the exposure to the same information on the internet. So that also again rewires, our brain in some way, right? We're always absorbing, you know, um, other work out there, all the time, right? I don't know, but I find it really admirable when a designer is able to establish a language, a sort of more personal language while serving, these commercial problems. Yeah.
True. Once again, I'd like to thank you for joining us here at Two Stocks. It was amazing hearing about your amazing career and your suggestions for upcoming designers and those who are actively involved in this industry. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.